I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me this week are Jeff Ranke and Anna Wells. We each have more than 15 years of experience covering the manufacturing industry. Every week, we take the 5 most popular stories in the manufacturing industry and discuss the implications they have on the industry going forward. Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. Finally, if you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. Anna, how you doing this week?
I'm doing great.
Doing great? Now that we have everything sorted in the studio area?
So many things to sort today, but we got it sorted.
The larger the space becomes for video production, the more stuff we accumulate in weird areas.
Yeah, I think we might have like a bit of a hoarder situation happening with the video team here.
That's right.
They can't hear me.
The only thing the studio is missing is like stacks of newspapers. Jeff, do you have any hoarded old food underneath you?
Not seeing anything. Not seeing any mice scurrying across the floor or anything like that. So I think we're still okay.
All right. How you doing this week?
I'm good, man.
All right. Well, just a reminder that we're live nearly every Friday at about 1:30 on YouTube. And before we get started with this week's top stories, we have a word from our sponsor.
Oil Eater's household cleaners, industrial cleaners, and industrial equipment are specifically designed to replace dangerous solvents and are used throughout the world. Our safe water-based formula dissolves grease and grime for almost any surface and leaves a fresh, non-chemical scent. Our ultra-concentrated formulas are perfect for light, medium, or heavy cleaning and can be used on shop floors, in parts washers, to clean equipment, and more. VOC compliant, Oil Eater will do an excellent job in a multitude of applications, safely and cost-effectively, while reducing your chemical usage. Safe for the user, safe for the surfaces being cleaned, and safe for the environment. For more information, visit oileater.com or call 800-528-0334.
All right, we're back. And now our first story, how to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. You may remember Bree Pettis. A few years ago, the co-founder of MakerBot was on the cover of Wired, Make, and Popular Science after his DIY 3D printer became an overnight sensation. Then, Stratasys bought MakerBot, and Pettis moved on to other ventures. Now, Pettis is the CEO of Bantam Tools, and he's trying to create a new wave of desktop machines. Only, this time it's a CNC milling machine. His machine is part of an effort to get U.S. companies to bring prototyping and manufacturing back in-house. He also has some thoughts on how to close the skills gap and build an independent manufacturing workforce. Pettis remembers at a young age when education focused on filling manufacturing jobs. But now, the U.S., as a community, has not done well finding ways to embrace manufacturing. He thinks part of the solution is telling the stories of people engaged in exciting developments in the industry. If an accurate picture can be painted, people will be inspired. So, Bree, come to our websites more often. That's kind of what we do on a daily basis. Pettis said, the culture needs to value manufacturing to narrow the skills gap. The current culture doesn't attract top talent to the many well-paying manufacturing jobs. Jeff, he also wants a culture of students and young people who have the urge to create. And I mean, if anyone knows about how it's hard to get young people to be inspired to do anything, you know, it's a man with 3 young daughters.
3 teenagers, yeah, they're inspired by their own ambitions, not necessarily mine, which is sort of where I want to go with this. I mean, everything he says in here makes total sense. Can't argue with it. The unfortunate reality is we love running these articles, but we're sort of preaching to the choir, right? Everybody in manufacturing knows all these things that he hit on, and he's completely accurate with all of it. I think what I would focus on a little bit is to make manufacturing work better here in the U.S. Yes, we've got a lot of opportunity right now based on the fact that the pandemic really made people rethink their supply chains and want to do more stuff closer to home. But even he admits that with Bantam, they still do some manufacturing overseas, or they source from overseas. They don't even do everything here in the U.S. So, and that's okay. It's a global economy, and more so every single day. I think the biggest issue, and again, we've talked about this a ton here, with manufacturing in the U.S. is we've got all these jobs open right now, and we can't fill them. And I think one of the biggest issues with that is, and you alluded to it, and he did as well, and we've talked about it a ton, it is this societal perception or misperception of manufacturing. But I think one of the biggest issues is like the parents. I don't think it's really the teachers anymore. And I was thinking about pulling up a bunch of stats showing all this, how the perceptions have changed over time with manufacturing. But I remember growing up, my dad was a tool and die maker, and when I decided to go to college and go more the white collar as opposed to the blue collar route, he was relieved. Yeah. He was happy. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that parents always want their kids to do better, more. And it's not settling. And I think that's the biggest misperception. You're not settling for a manufacturing job anymore. These are great jobs. And I think a lot of those misperceptions, especially from my dad's perspective, came from the fact that he worked for a company that probably underappreciated him. Right. The work environment was hard. It was a difficult place to go. And there wasn't a chance for a lot of upward movement in his situation, which is why he looked at his kids hopefully doing something different and in his mind better, which you can always appreciate, especially as a parent. I mean, we're all there. Oh, yeah. So I think it's getting past, it's really that area. And when we look at who do we need to influence, who do we need to talk to, it's like the parent-teacher associations, it's like community groups, it's youth coaches, it's all of those types of folks that can really have a big impact on people, and understanding that it's cool to dream or aspire to get into a manufacturing job. Yeah, they're great roles. Yeah. And I think that's where the disconnect is right now. It goes a little bit beyond doing more prototyping. Yeah.
No, agreed. And it's I think that manufacturers are doing a better job of bringing students in. They're doing a better job of putting a better face forward, and it just needs to be more of that. But I mean, to his point, I do think that you get more people in design and engineering and manufacturing if you get them making things too. And Anna, kind of my takeaway from this article was that this is what he did before with MakerBot. He made MakerBot a small desktop 3D printer that you could make for yourself. You could 3D print your own things in your own home, and that made people excited. That's why he was on the cover of Make magazine. That's why he was such kind of a cult figure for all these makers, because that's what he was doing. And I think that's what he's trying to do with Bantam Tools as well. But, you know, it kind of isn't. A desktop CNC milling machine doesn't have the same sex appeal as a desktop 3D printer.
It doesn't. And, you know, I agree with a lot of what both of you guys are saying, that there's still a big perception problem that's not solved. And you would think by now, because people are aware of it, that you would think that it was getting better. But if you look at the data behind it, it really is not getting better. And I think, you know, there are a few ways to approach that. I think you need more figureheads that represent tradespeople that have mainstream appeal, like Bree Pettis, like Mike Rowe. Like you know, if we had like a couple dozen more Mike Rowes, I mean, like there's lots of manufacturing influencers out there, and like to Jeff's point, they're not, I love them and I feel bad even saying this, but like they're not very well known outside the industry. So it does become sort of like an echo chamber where it's hard to move the needle in that way, because people outside of that, you know, the low-hanging fruit has already been grabbed. And I think in a way too, even like these programs where you're targeting high school students that are coming and bringing them into your facilities, like sometimes that's the low-hanging fruit as well, because those are the kids that already know that that's kind of their track, right? You need to be like approaching this more comprehensively. But I do think one way to do that also is, as manufacturing continues to kind of merge with tech, you're going to get more interest in what these companies are doing. I mean, if you look like at how the tech sector is sort of the cool place to be for kids coming out of college or high school, like everybody wants to work for Google. You know, I would say that like the Teslas of the world are kind of moving into that space. You know, SpaceX, Blue Origin, these manufacturers that are building things and doing exciting things. You know, people are intrigued by that, and those names are household names. So, I mean, even like GM and Ford, like they're showing themselves as being like innovators at this point in time, where I think that people want to feel proud about saying like, I work for this company that's doing all this cool stuff. So some of that's marketing, some of that's the tech, but I think the more visibility, the better. And obviously that's a long game, but that's how changing perception works. Like that's what you got to do.
No, I do agree with you, Jeff, that it should be at the parents level, but we have seen some good progress in terms of schools getting back into tech ed classes, something that was pretty much abandoned for the last 10 years, and it was just a travesty, because without them I would have never known that I could actually work with wood. So And we've seen a lot of progress when it comes to tech ed in rural communities, particularly with community colleges that have been doing really well. One thing that I would like to see another, or kind of make a bigger comeback are, I can't remember what the classes were called, but basically once you were a junior or senior, if you kind of knew that the trades or manufacturing was going to be your track, you could work all like a full day and get high school credits and still graduate with anybody else. I mean, that's how my dad got into the business, was that, you know, by his second half of junior year, he was pretty much working full time because he was like, yeah, none of that other business is for me. This is the way I want to go. And I think when we got into some of the programs like No Child Left Behind or other test-focused, programs, we kind of got away from that. You know, we kind of got away from because it was sort of an identity problem, Jeff, right? Like, you know, I want better for my kid. I don't want my kid to work in some dirty facility. But it also made it sort of we kind of cut off that entry point where people were starting in high school. And I mean, there's some interesting stories of people that, you know, when they start their junior year of high school, I mean, by the time they've already got like 14 years in by the time they're 30, you know, and they have incredible seniority. 30, 40, what did I say out there? Anyway, math.
Don't worry about math.
Clearly why I didn't
We
do
do
it.
words here.
Not necessary.
No, but I think that's something that we're kind of missing, and we could do a little bit more to move the industry forward.
So you're talking about like a child labor solution?
No.
Being what we're missing?
No, not like what Foxconn does with interns.
Okay.
This was legitimate. You would get high school credits for going to work, and you would still get you would get paid. You'd get paid a fair wage as well. So it's not child labor, but it's also, I mean, it's also kind of a best case scenario for people that aren't on sort of a college track, and people like, you know, even the tone that I use when I say that makes it seem like it's negative, but it's not negative.
No, it's not at all. No.
You're putting somebody ahead of the rest of the pack in manufacturing by getting them in early to something that they could really thrive in. You know,
And enjoy.
Yeah. It's the same as people taking college classes in high school as an AP course. You know, we're getting, they're getting a jump start on college. They're just getting a jump start on the labor market.
True. And I think another reason that our parents' generation like wanted to move us away from it is, I don't know about you guys, but I know like a lot of that era of tradespeople, like the ergonomics were not as good back then. The precautions were not as good. And a lot of them, you know, people are hitting like 50, 55, and they just cannot do those jobs anymore. And that's like a really hard place to be, you know?
Oh, yeah. And you're aged out.
You're aged out, and it's unfair, and you know, you're not like being taken care of. So I think like now, if you look at some of the headway that's been made in terms of like PPE equipment, stuff that's designed to make sure that like you can continue to be an electrician as long as you want without like crushing your body.
Yeah, without being like.
Well, I think another thing too that's changed is just the whole operational dynamic. In addition to safety and clean, these manufacturers just run better.
Yeah.
One of the reasons my dad was always frightened about us maybe getting into manufacturing was because he could see 5 or 10 years down the road at any given time that plant could shut down.
Oh, yeah.
It just wasn't run as well, and he was right. By the time he retired, where he worked, that facility was shut down and sold to somebody else. So I think the fact that these are more stable operations, they're just run better from an enterprise level, is also encouraging, and the timing is right in terms of getting in this highly qualified next generation of workers.
Yeah, and I think we also need to almost differentiate what type of job we're talking about. Because when you talk about like Teslas and SpaceX's, I'm thinking like design engineering jobs. You know, you're not thinking of assemblers. You're not thinking of the assembly and QA people.
But they do have those people.
True. And that's where it's got to be like, people got to realize that you don't just have to be an engineer to work there.
Right, exactly, yep.
All right. Well, I think we spent at least our 5 minutes on that story, so let's move on to the next one. Rescues after China building collapse. The death toll has risen after a residential and commercial building collapsed in central China. As of this recording, 26 people have been confirmed dead, but a 10th survivor, an unidentified woman, was recently pulled out of the wreckage 6 days after the building suddenly caved in. Teams have been using dogs, hand tools, drones, and electronic life detectors in search for survivors. At least 9 people have been arrested in connection with the collapse. The building is described as a, quote, self-built building, The question mark's mine. And there is a suspicion of ignoring building codes or committing other violations. The arrested include the building owner, 3 people in charge of design and construction, and 5 others who allegedly gave a false safety assessment. An increase in the number of collapses of self-built buildings in recent years has prompted China's president to call for additional checks to uncover structural weaknesses. Anna, the more I read the story, you throw in that caveat like, oh, this is a different place, this is China. But you can't, it sounded to me like they were building a tree fort with the lack of regulation and how certain, simple things like floors that weren't on the plans are added. I can't believe things like this happen anywhere in the world.
Yeah, it is hard to believe. And it's another story, I think, that reinforces the need for regulation. Like the building being described as self-built. I mean, I'll say this. Anyone who's done a renovation or built any structure of any size in the United States, or at least in most states, has had a laundry list of forms, requirements, and it drives everybody nuts. Like, what you have to go through, the hoops and stuff to get this stuff built. But, you're submitting erosion plans and all these visuals, to make sure that what you build in the end is not going to collapse. There's a reason behind it. And as you mentioned, China has arrested some people, 9 people, and the president has said, quote, "It's necessary to check such structures for any hidden dangers and fix them to prevent major accidents." Yeah. But when people are making these structural modifications and then also false safety assessments, something is wrong at the root of this. How is that even happening? I know here this is a government role. It's not something that you can just submit a form that you doctored that says this building is safe to be in.
Yeah. Which plenty of people still do.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. The fact is that China has a long history of poor adherence to safety standards. And it's not uncommon, according to a report in The Guardian that I read, to see illegal addition of extra floors and failure to use reinforcing iron bars.
Yeah.
That means if that's a matter of course there, then you have a bigger problem than just this one-off. This is not a one-off. This is a bigger problem than that.
No, I pulled those exact 2 quotes out as well, Anna, and that's what led me to think this sounds like how kids make a bad tree fort, Jeff. We're just no. I think we should have, it'll be fine.
Here's the difference, though. When you go into a tree fort, you know what it was built by and by whom, and you have an understanding there. Folks getting into this building did not.
Yeah.
There was no appreciation of that. And the fact that we don't even know the exact size of this building sort of underscores a lot of the issues that are going on here. Looking again, I think maybe been the same article, but looking, India is the only country in the world that has more building collapses than China on an annual basis. It's crazy, especially when you look at a country that has the infrastructure potentially and the just standard of living that China has. These types of things should not become an issue, but they do because of a corrupt system in terms of these regulators, in air quotes, checking this stuff out or not checking it out. And as a result, a lot of people's lives are put in danger. What it feels like in trying to do some research on this, and again, it's difficult because China doesn't let a whole lot of information out here to let you know what's going on, but it does reaffirm some of those stereotypes or classifications in terms of things in China. There's not a focus on quality. Okay, whenever you look at products coming from China, they're lower cost, lower quality potentially. Well, if that emanates into some of these situations as well, it's not a surprise that they're having trouble with these buildings. If they're not focused on quality and the focus is on, hey, let's get this up there so we have more space to either rent out, bring people into the restaurant, whatever the case is. Obviously, these things are going to happen when quality and safety aren't a priority, and that just seems to permeate throughout a lot of these stories and a lot of potentially the culture that we're seeing in China as it's trying to grow and expand. The one thing, too, that did come up, sorry to cut you off. No. I mentioned infrastructure. That is another concern in China. A lot of it is really old, and again, when we don't have regulators doing their job and they can be bribed to basically just write it off and go forward, I mean, this could be continuing to be a huge issue, especially if China wants to develop that upper middle class.
Yeah. I understand if you have the bedroom in the basement, that's not a bedroom because it's, legally it doesn't have egress, whatever. But when they're talking about not knowing how many floors the building had, that is beyond me. Like, I mean, I understand there's lazy regulators, but no one just stood outside and counted windows?
No, and it only becomes a chronic problem when you know you're not going to get caught.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, anyway, very frustrating situation. Let's move on to our next most popular story this week. New airport, a quote, starting gun for future of transportation. On April 25th, 2022, Urban Airport and Supernull unveiled the Air 1 in the United Kingdom. The Air 1 is a proprietary deployable operations hub that can provide quick multimodal infrastructure for eVTOLs and other passenger travel. It's like a small turnkey airport, but they call it a vertiport. The Air 1 is a 17,000 square foot circular structure built in just 11 weeks and designed to serve 4 key markets: passenger air taxis, autonomous delivery drones, disaster emergency management and defense operations, and logistics. The middle of the vertiport has a 56-foot circular final approach and takeoff platform that rises 19 feet into the sky using a small link lift system for takeoffs and landings. Supernull is a part of Hyundai Motor Group, and it's developing an eVTOL vehicle prototype called the SA-1, which is actually in display at the vehicle hangar. The Air 1 is located about 2 blocks from the city's main rail and bus stations to show how these prefab structures can advance multimodal travel. Now, Anna, what I liked about this story was we were talking about a brand new airport that things couldn't fly in and out of. So it struck me at first, but then I realized this is more of a demonstrator or a prototype than an actual let's say, ready for prime time concept.
Yeah, it's a prototype airport.
Because that's what we need.
Right. As you know, I tend not to appreciate developments in areas that are so aspirational that, I don't know. There's so many more pressing issues to deal with, I feel like, than this. I mean, we can't even use this airport. I get, like, they're trying to maybe get at the demo part of it, or maybe even get at the infrastructure part of it, but like that's really not the way it typically works, that you build the infrastructure first and then convince people to get an airplane to go to work. I don't know.
Well, I think it's cool because it's like deployable infrastructure.
I don't think it's as cool as you think it is. I don't know. I just think it puts a lot of pressure on the timeline for some of these things to proceed, right? I mean, they're basically like sitting on a cost center that's like, I don't know like what the payback is going to be in the near term. Logistics, yes, I see like that within a handful of years. Targeting commuter traffic or passenger taxis, like that sort of hinges on like some pretty broad assumptions that it's going to be more convenient to fly to the place that you aren't actually trying to get to. I mean, there's right. I mean, like there's a lot of like buzz that for a long time there's a lot of buzz around car sharing, and people in the end I think weren't really attracted to the idea of it because you don't always know when you're going to have your car. I think it's the same to me. It's like the same kind of thing. It's like, well, like I need to get here. I need a way to get to this airport, to fly to this other airport, to get to a bus station, to get to my job or something like that.
Yeah.
I just don't know that people are quite ready for that. That's going to take some doing.
Yeah.
And I know that it's like, this is for trying to like play that out, see how it works. Maybe they'll get some more perspective on consumer preferences, but it seems a bit ambitious to me, not knowing if any of that stuff's going to work.
It could make more sense if you think of it more as a helipad. Because then it kind of, your typical business traveler is going to be, it's only going to be high-end travelers. Like,
a helipad.
So we're catering to the high-end Wall Street guys. That's
so
what
just helicopter travel.
You got to take care of them.
Okay.
All right.
Now I'm in.
The other things are that it has its own power supply that can charge EV vehicles, which would be important. And in the immediate like future where it could be used is disaster relief. So the big part of this is that they can be made really in a really quick turnaround. This one was made in 11 weeks. But the whole idea is that say there was a disaster where we are, they could drop one of these over by the Alliant or someplace really close to the disaster area and then fly in supplies and support as a result. So that's where it could actually make a big play before it's people driving their EVs in, parking so they could take their urban air taxi or walk to the bus.
But again, so like, say there's another like Katrina scale hurricane and that area is decimated and it needs a lot of help. We're going to spend 11 weeks building a freaking airport there first so we can that doesn't make any sense.
No,
like,
this one took 11 weeks specifically, but the whole idea is that it doesn't take 11 weeks.
Okay, so say it takes 2 weeks. Like, don't.
They're going to do it in one day.
Oh, all right.
It's inflatable.
Hey, note to producers, can I just get some popcorn the next time we have one of these types of stories here so I can just enjoy this back and forth?
Can they do it in 15 minutes, David?
Jeff, do you think they could do it in 15 minutes?
Oh, man. You had to know going in. This was not going to, you were going to be on an island with this one. Right?
No, I wasn't going to be on an island. I was going to be in a boutique airport.
So I've moved past the fact that I was called a curmudgeon on this. I've just totally gotten past that when you called me that on this podcast. And I don't let it stick with me that my daughters continually remind me how old I am. Okay? I've gotten past all of that.
Good.
So I read this and watched the video like 3 times to try to get on board. To not be that guy.
What am I missing?
And I don't see it. I don't get it. I don't understand why we need this. I don't see how it's a priority. We still haven't gotten like EV vehicles figured out, and now we're going to build something for EV flying machines that at best hold 5 people. I don't see how that's better.
Yeah,
I don't get it.
It's all about the future of multimodal transportation, Jeff.
Let's figure out the basics first before we start going here, man. I mean, there's just better ways to spend our time and energy. And nice try with the disaster recovery angle.
No,
I mean, that was digging deep.
No, I legitimately could, if there was, that's one of the biggest issues is
when David's flustered because he stops and starts more than twice. One
of the biggest issues with disaster relief is reaching the area. And, I mean, if this could create an opportunity for that, I don't know. I agree with you. I'm David's advocating the heck out of this thing, just trying to get it to work. Like, no, you guys will see the light of the urban air ports. No, I agree with you. This is it's more on the futurism side of things that we do. It's not something that we need right now, but we keep seeing how the landscape of transportation might change, and they're trying to figure out what that might look like going forward.
No, I'm glad that you are you're more of the visionary, I would say, of our group, and I'm definitely more the it's not practical, but it's
I'm
not.
Just a curmudgeon.
Yeah, right. I'm like
the curmudgeon.
Yeah. In, as a metaphor, I'm like the lit cigarette that you guys keep putting out, just stamping out. Just don't see it. And actually the producers are so on it that they brought you some popcorn for the next time. So hopefully if we, let's see what the next story is.
Yeah, let's see what we can get going.
We can really get fired up.
Thank you, Alex.
Anyway, when they open one of these, it's in the UK now, but one's coming to Miami, and I'm sure one will be in Chicago. I'm going to go see it. Right now it's just a tourist trap, though.
All right.
Our second most popular story this week, 1,000 UAW members strike in Wisconsin and Iowa. More than 1,000 workers at a pair of C&H industrial plants went on strike on Monday. The company makes agriculture and construction equipment. According to the United Auto Workers Union, employees in Racine, Wisconsin and Burlington, Iowa went on strike after contract talks faltered. The work stoppage is just the latest in a series of strikes, including the month-long strike at Deere & Company. Deere workers got 10% raises and improved benefits for 10,000 UAW workers at that equipment maker. Anna, every time we have a story about a new strike, we say, strike while the iron is hot. Seems like it's hot for C&H.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. We've talked a lot about this shift in leverage with unemployment still at record lows. Now is the time for labor to act if they're going to. I mean, they haven't had this much power in decades, and there are precedents being set daily with these types of scenarios that are working out in workers' favors. And while there are countless examples of that, I think Deere, of course, stands out, considering that these two companies are in the same industry. Deere's strike felt like forever, I think because it was so widely covered, and maybe in the face of like tremendous demand, a month was forever. But there was a lot of outside pressures, I think, that applied to that strike. It's not like with consumer auto where people just don't get their new cars and everyone's like, well, in this case, like, this could impact like a farmer's like harvest. It could impact food supplies potentially. That's the kind of stuff they were saying about the Deere strike. And with supply chain conditions like the way that they are now, I think that it's just an added layer of pressure on these companies to negotiate. And we'll see if they also deal with some of the public sentiment that came the way of the John Deere strike, because John Deere is such a household name. And I doubt that Case New Holland has the same kind of broad-reaching brand awareness as Deere. Certainly not the same feel as the Deere strike where mainstream media was covering that day and night. This is a little bit more, under the radar, I think. So you don't have like politicians nationally really weighing in on this. You don't have a lot of like social media stuff happening. So I don't know if they'll feel as pressured to negotiate the way Deere did, but I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I hope precedent has certainly been set that they have maybe earned a seat at the table here to try to figure something out.
No, I agree. And Jeff, I think part of the Deere work stoppage was that Deere started getting some intense pressure from suppliers and manufacturing partners. And that's going to be the same case for CNH as well.
Absolutely. Case New Holland is just as big a brand name within that market. I think they won't get the same pressure from investors in the financial market that Deere did, as well as because of the media coverage. But within that market, from a consumer basis, they are going to feel this because they operate at a little bit different price point than John Deere. So the impact that it could actually have on the end user market is potentially even greater if these guys cannot get what they need in terms of their implements and their tractors and things of that nature. So I think there is a potential to be a huge deal. The other thing, we brought this up with John Deere as well, and this is the John Deere strike. That was more than 1,000 workers. It was
It was 10,000, I think.
It was much larger. So I think that's another part of it where maybe the scale is a little bit different. But what's the same is I'm quoting an article here from the Des Moines Register. Case New Holland celebrated a year last year where they reported a $1.76 billion profit in 2021. That was a 21% improvement over 2019. Their CEO brought home just over $12 million in bonuses. So when you see those types of numbers and then you look at what these folks are getting paid, again, referencing this article as well as Indeed, those guys are still starting, or the average, I should say, pay is under $25 an hour for a lot of their plant floor workers. That's not competitive anymore. You need to step up. These folks are seeing what's going on in other plants like John Deere and others in the area as well. And they're seeing not only an opportunity, but also what they're owed. Again, these were frontline. These were folks that stayed on board and were working long hours when everybody else was on lockdown. So they put themselves out there, and now they're just looking for a little bit of payback. And the company sure seems like it has the coffers that they can open up to help them out.
It's always hard to sympathize when you see record profits. But they always like to compliment the workers, too, for their hard work.
Your favorite thing.
In the face of such a struggle. Now, the one thing I saw was that this strike is the first at the plants in nearly 2 decades and comes after a previous, I think it was a 6-year contract between CNH and the United Auto Workers, expired on April 30th. So, maybe they didn't see this coming because it's been so long. But, I mean, I feel like companies need to have a better pulse on where the workers stand in terms of, being happy. Do you think companies see this coming?
Well, I didn't realize that their contract just expired on April 30th. Sometimes there's some wiggle room there where they're working without a contract and trying to negotiate. These guys did not waste a minute.
No, it's just like, let's get at it.
So clearly there was some built up momentum there where they were concerned about the way things were going.
Case has an incredible legacy that dates back to like 1842 in Racine. Racine has always been known as sort of that agricultural equipment manufacturing hub. And it's just, I don't know. I know that it's not nearly the scale at John Deere, like we've said. I think that CNH only has about 5,000 workers total, right?
I don't know the total.
Oh, okay. The scale's not there, but it could still be quite disruptive.
Oh, extremely. is it still Racine Case High School?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Hey,
It was named after Case, huh? It was named after the brand?
Named after Jerome Case. Yeah, no, it was. I have a former uncle that used to teach there, and so that's where when all of my friends went to camp in my town, I went to all the camps at Case, and they're like, "Who's this guy?" Like, "Hi, how's it going? I know the guy running it. No one's gonna like me. Thanks. I'm gonna get extra T-shirts though. What's up?" All right, our most popular story. Foxconn could soon own Lordstown. Last September, Lordstown Motors looked like it was on the brink of bankruptcy. But then, Foxconn offered a lifeline. The global electronics contract manufacturing giant offered to buy Lordstown's Ohio factory for $230 million and purchase $5 million in stock. Then, the companies would figure out a deal for Foxconn to assemble Lordstown's flagship SUV and build out its own EVs using Lordstown's tech. As of March, the two companies were still struggling to come to terms on certain conditions. Now, Lordstown has confirmed the conditions to close still have not been met. Foxconn has already paid the $200 million in down payments required by the agreement. And if the two parties can't realize closing terms by May 14th, Lordstown is obligated to repay. And if Lordstown can't repay, I know this was your story, but Foxconn is going to take everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm trying to figure out if this was Foxconn's master plan, actually.
Yeah.
Which sounds nefarious, but we've seen their track record, and I feel like a bait and switch is certainly on the table, potentially. It's not out of the realm.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for Lordstown, you talk about leverage. Like, their only option here is probably bankruptcy outside of this. So they're probably doing their best here to negotiate, I think. But they don't have a lot of good options otherwise, so that's the hand that they have been dealt. But for Foxconn, if this deal doesn't get made, there's actually, like, they're not actually out that much, like $50 million in terribly worthless stock, which doesn't potentially, it's not worthless forever, maybe even.
Yeah.
And if they can simply take all of Lordstown's assets and then they have some more flexibility with how they're going to move forward, and they avoid a tie-up with this very badly damaged brand, I don't know. I mean, maybe they're not negotiating in good faith as expressed in this press release. I don't think that Lordstown benefits from making it sound like they're not, because they still got to work this out. But we know from past experience that you can't exactly trust them at their word. So there's a lot we don't know about this situation, but my point overall is that Foxconn is in a very good position here, and Lordstown is not.
No. I mean, I don't know if Lordstown's going to be able to, understand that it's in a bad position. I mean, it's not like they have any experience
being in a bad position.
Being in a bad position pretty much since their founding. And I actually, based on Foxconn's history, I kind of think the opposite, where the more I have learned about Foxconn and how they operate, they play it real fast and loose, where it's like, I don't know, yeah, maybe we'll buy that factory. You know what? Maybe we won't. You know what? Maybe we'll buy the factory and we'll make cars there. You know what? Maybe we won't. So I think this was just another potential move that Foxconn saw and kind of just let it ride. I don't think they were...
This is all coming out of their marketing budget, is what you're saying?
I mean, not their marketing budget, but I mean, $250 million for Foxconn is nothing.
No.
And I mean...
Oh, I know, yeah.
And it's just like, I was actually... The most surprising part of this entire story was when you said Foxconn already paid the $2 million in down payments. I was like...
$200 million,
Or $200 million. I'm like, wow, they sent a check? That is shocking. Jeff, if Foxconn does take all of Lordstown, when they take all of Lordstown's assets, what then?
Yeah, this reminds me of either like when I'm playing Monopoly with the girls and they just kind of gang up on me and just start taking all my stuff. I can't pay rent anymore, so they start taking properties and hotels.
Your kids do that? They just throw you right out on the street?
Oh, they're brutal. My youngest daughter, she is vicious when it comes to Monopoly. There's no games there.
She just starts flicking the hotels and
she's super cold about it. She's like, well, if you can't pay, you can just give me Boardwalk.
Oh, man.
All right. What am I going to do?
Boardwalk,
honey?
though? Okay.
Whatever. Yeah. Or like those three magenta colored properties over here.
Oh, man.
I don't even know. Was that St. Charles? Yeah, she's harsh, but she's set up well for the future. Yeah, this could
Ready
also
for corporate America.
Yeah, Lordstown is kind of like me taking my 1985 Pontiac Grand Am to the dealership and being like, "Hey, let's bargain. Let's deal. What can I do for a new vehicle here?" They have no bargaining power, and I think you agree with half of what you said about Foxconn. I think they got into this saying, hey, let's just see what we got here, because they do have big aspirations for getting into the electric vehicle marketplace. They've got this mobility and harmony. Is it MIH or HMI? I can't remember here now. Let me look at my notes.
Okay.
Yeah, Mobility and Harmony Consortium of automotive suppliers. It's like 1,700 automotive suppliers that have come together, with Foxconn's goal being to sort of be the Android of EV cars, where they've got this basic infrastructure that they can have together as a contract manufacturer to then basically make whatever car you want. You want to put a different body on it? We can handle that. Just get us the specs, because we've already got all this infrastructure in place. So I think once they got in there and saw what an unholy mess Lordstown is, they basically said, you know what, we put this ridiculous provision in here that Lordstown would never have signed on to unless they had no other choice. We can always execute that and move forward, because they've still got the facility that they wanted, if they do indeed want to get into EVs, which it seems they really, really do.
Right? If anything, it's bad news again for Mount Pleasant, because there have been rumors about Mount Pleasant, Wisconsin. There have been rumors about those facilities possibly being a hub for Foxconn to make electric vehicles, which, I mean, Foxconn's been talking about making electric vehicles forever.
Right.
I mean, there were rumors that they were going to build the Apple car. I mean, the Apple car still remains one of the greatest rumors out there. Like, when are they going to drop it?
Scam. Yeah.
Never. They will never drop it.
It's not a thing.
But yet, so many industrial designers out there will come up with new Apple car concepts all the time, get millions of views, because people are like, I think this is the one. There will be no one. There will be no one.
So let me get this straight. Going back to last week, you think there's going to be a Datsun before an Apple car?
Definitely. EV Datsun made on a Foxconn chassis.
There you go.
I saw this thing recently about, and I cannot remember which electric car company it was, but they were like so worried about competing against Apple that they decided to make their own phone. Like,
what?
That, I'll have to look it up, and I'll bring some more information next week. But that's how crazy these rumors have gotten. Like, well, if we need to compete with the Apple car, which doesn't exist, we're gonna make our own phone too, and it's gonna compete with the iPhone. What are you doing? Like,
yeah, that's what the world needs, another Zune.
Just take a day off work and then and take a long nap and then come back.
Yeah, you've had too much coffee. Anyway, I remain skeptical of anything Foxconn does. The only company I might trust less is Lordstown.
Oh, yeah.
So it's quite a partnership.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, together we will we will create nothing. We'll create a lot of bluster.
Yep, we're going to spend some money, and that's it.
Yeah. No, so it remains to be seen, but
I think Lordstown holds some sort of record for the most coverage without actually producing a product.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
you don't have to produce a product to be publicly traded. That's adorable.
Lordstown was the company that did the trials with the truck by pushing it downhill, right?
Yes, they did. Yes, they did.
That's what we need more of. All right. Well, before we move on to In Case You Missed It, we have another word from our sponsor.
Oil Eater's household cleaners, industrial cleaners, and industrial equipment are specifically designed to replace dangerous solvents and are used throughout the world. Our safe water-based formula dissolves grease and grime for almost any surface and leaves a fresh, non-chemical scent. Our ultra-concentrated formulas are perfect for light, medium, or heavy cleaning and can be used on shop floors, in parts washers, to clean equipment, and more. VOC compliant, Oil Eater will do an excellent job in a multitude of applications, safely and cost effectively, while reducing your chemical usage. Safe for the user, safe for the surfaces being cleaned, and safe for the environment. For more information, visit oileater.com or call 800-528-0334.
And we're back with In Case You Missed It. Stories that weren't as popular on the website, but still stand to make a big impact on the industry going forward. Anna, I'd like to start with you this week. What's your In Case You Missed It?
Sure. So, my In Case You Missed It this week, the headline read, Food Plant Fires Fuel Conspiracy Theory. So that's
Story's amazing.
That's where we are. Okay. So first of all, let me make it clear how much I hate conspiracy theories. Even like the funny ones, like we faked the moon landing, stuff like that, like, because they go against a core belief that I possess as an individual, which is that 3 people can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead. I just don't believe that that this stuff can happen without like us all finding out about it.
Nice.
But anyway, apparently there's a growing conspiracy theory alleging that fires at various U.S. food processing plants and other facilities are part of a deliberate effort to undermine the food supply in the U.S. So the Associated Press contacted officials like in relation to 23 different events, 8 from 2021 and the rest from this year so far, many of which were already deemed accidental. The NFPA also weighed in, saying that there haven't been more fires, just more people paying attention to them. So more conspiracy theorists. Does that surprise you?
Nope.
So anyway, we know in our work covering this industry just how common these types of incidents actually are. And to be honest, like if they were increasing in any way, in my opinion, it would almost surely be due to the greater presence of like a transient workforce and untrained individuals at food companies as they struggle to attract workers. We know that's a real thing that's happening. But I just want you all to know that industry experts want to express that there is no danger to the food supply, and these fires are, as far as we know, accidental, very, very likely accidental. And this is from like fire departments and fire marshals. So don't worry about that. Please don't pass that along. If that's something that you hear, you can kind of quelch that rumor.
But isn't it in their best interest to say that these are coincidental? Wouldn't you say it's funny that all these things happen together at once and no one says anything? I just think, first of all, I want to know. Conspiracy theories or time travel, what do you like least?
Oh, God. That is a Sophie's choice if I've ever heard one. I hate them equally. Can I say that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Jeff, don't you think that these fires at food processing facilities could potentially be behind the skyrocketing prices that you're feeling?
Whoa.
I know I'm feeling at the grocery store. Isn't that interesting?
I'll go a step further.
Whoa,
They
Jeff.
were
Okay.
probably set by Vladimir Putin to really drive them up due to, the conflict in Ukraine.
Dude.
He's doing all of these things at once to get back at the U.S. and drive up food prices.
What I heard was a relationship between chemtrails and fires at food processing facilities. Now, isn't it interesting that at food processing facilities that have had fires, they've seen chemtrails above? Is that not interesting?
I don't think it's even debatable
I'm just saying.
Guys,
in terms of how valid this is.
There was even a tie-in so I don't know if you saw that, like a plane crash near like a General Mills plant like a month or 2 ago. That was part of this, that it was like other disruptions like this plane crash. Isn't it interesting that it crashed right by a General Mills plant?
Yeah. Now, hold on a second. Planes don't crash all the time. Aerospace,
They do, though.
technologically advanced.
But
Prop
they-
planes
but they do.
crash every day.
But I'm just saying, this plane crashes near a food processing facility at the worst possible time. I like that the food industry also responded by saying, "You're just paying attention now."
Yeah, exactly. Like no one, no one noticed this stuff before, how often it actually happens. We do because we cover this.
Yeah.
I'm sure our listeners do because they are paying attention. But it's like suddenly people care about the supply chain. It's never been something, before when people ask like what you do for a living and you're like, oh, I write about stuff like the supply chain. Everyone's like, what's that? Sounds boring. See you later.
I mean, I joke about national irritants, but I actually really liked your analysis on this about how it's probably a result of more of a transient labor group and just, safety standards that have not either been adhered to or people really don't follow. I mean, we hear about a lot of injuries at not just food processing, but meat processing facilities. It's unfortunately more common than people think.
For
and
sure.
I think people would serve a greater good if they looked into that and maybe tried fixing it and making it a little bit safer for the workforce, Jeff, than, waxing on conspiracy
I mean,
theories.
it's obviously ridiculous. Food plants are extremely dangerous. When you look at things that you don't even think about being a concern, but like fires from like flour and baking goods, extremely flammable, extremely dangerous if they're not handled correctly. And you're right, it's an underpaid, undertrained workforce in a lot of situations with not a lot of experience. So yeah, these things are going to happen, and they are more susceptible, especially because there's sort of a convergence in a lot of these plants. There's not a lot of small food production facilities anymore. They're getting bigger and bigger as there's more consolidation. So there's more opportunity for these things to happen.
That was one of the first things that blew my mind when we got into this industry was the revelation that dust explodes.
Combustible dust.
Yeah. I was just like, what do you mean you have a big vacuum for dust? Like, that's an issue?
Yeah,
Like,
it's so strange. And Jeff's right, though. Like, before people knew about combustible dust, like 50% of like flour mills would just explode.
Yeah.
I mean, it just...
Well, that one in Atlanta, I think that was about 20 years ago, almost exactly. Huge. One of the worst industrial disasters in U.S. history.
Yikes.
well,
So anyway, please don't fuel the conspiracy. There's not one.
yeah. But if you do, it's not your fault for thinking critically, because you're just an outlier,
Yep.
and the society needs more.
No, we don't.
Talk to your
No.
friends on Twitter about it.
No.
Yeah.
We don't need more of that.
We need more internet tribalism. Just find 4 like-minded people, create memes, and send them out. Help America.
Man, you want to really set off the curmudgeon in me? Let's keep going on that
Oh, man.
topic.
Let's get on to Jeff's in case you missed it.
Jeff.
Before he gets mad.
What's your... Oh, my God. In case you missed it, is about, like, curmudgeons in America. No,
All sorts of them.
what is your, in case you missed it this week, Jeff?
So continue to following up on this story with this Rivian plant down in Georgia outside of Atlanta. It's actually getting very interesting from perspective. Before we talked about how there was sort of this rivalry between the 2 Republican candidates for governor down there. The current governor, Kemp, is saying, hey, this is great. We do have to put up a lot of money to get Rivian down here to build this facility, but it's 7,500 jobs. And it's in an area of our state that could really use it, not to mention all the potential infrastructure that could follow this EV maker coming down here. His rival, also running for governor, Perdue, the former senator down there, is saying, no, you're just basically catering to this Soros guy who's a big backer of Rivian, I should say. So there was this political fighting that sort of has an underlying Trump emphasis to it, with Perdue being a former supporter of, or a current supporter of former President Trump. But now what's coming to the forefront is actually a lot of people in this area are very concerned about this facility. It's a huge facility, again, 7,500 jobs, and they're worried about it being in this rural setting, kind of destroying their lifestyle right now. They're worried about environmental factors, they're worried about the increased traffic, the pollution, and just what it's going to do to their environment. So what you've got is people in this area voicing what I feel are very legitimate concerns, and it's a growing number now. It's not like when it initially came up when we were looking at, like, 200 people standing out in the middle of nowhere, not really being too vocal, to where there is sort of a groundswell of questions being asked. The state has just authorized $1.5 billion out of the $5 billion cost for Rivian to build this facility. It's the largest in Georgia state history, and it continues to be a debate. So it's sort of like, is the state correct in coming in saying, look, we know what this is going to do for us long term. I understand some of the pain points, but this is a good deal for us. We have to do this, versus the people saying no thanks. Who's right here? Because you feel like the political powers do have the people's best interest in mind in terms of looking forward, but if they don't want it, how much do you force it down their throat? And if it would come to it, where does Rivian go? We just ran, we were talking about this the last couple of weeks. We've got Oklahoma and Kansas throwing out tons of money to who we think is Panasonic to get in on this EV sector. Maybe Rivian's got a lot of options where if they get in too much turmoil, or if there's just too much conversation here blocking them in Georgia, they can go someplace else. So I think this is going to be interesting to see how this continues to evolve, because it's not just about one facility, it's about a whole market segment. Again, Rivian's got Amazon behind it. It's got a lot of support. It's even got pre-orders for trucks and stuff that they're looking to roll out in the next couple of years. So I think this development could really set an interesting stage for EVs throughout the country.
Where is the plant? Do you know precisely where the plant is supposed to go?
It's about 45 miles outside of Atlanta, I believe,
Okay.
to the north of Atlanta. So it is a fairly rural setting, but it's sort of in the suburbs.
Oh, okay.
And again, these folks are saying, they're not necessarily saying absolutely not. They're saying, I need to see some data before we just go ahead and build it.
No, I mean, as we've seen in these sort of cases in the past, more of that is better.
Yeah.
Don't, be skeptical, ask questions, and make sure that this is something that your city wants and needs.
Well, I think the governor there is basically saying if we pause too much, they're gone.
Yeah.
Like they have other options. Again, those two states were begging somebody to come there without even telling everybody who it was they were trying to lure to their area. So, yeah, it'll be interesting.
Anna, your thoughts on the negotiations and everything happening in Georgia?
Yeah, it's interesting. Maybe people are becoming wise to the trade-offs potentially that come along with some of these bigger projects, and that they are taking a bit of a risk. It's not just a matter of like, these are jobs, we'll take them, whatever the cost. People are looking at some of the other potential downsides. Georgia, incidentally, was also the place where the spaceport situation took place, where a community was trying to create economic development by building this like sort of public space launch pad. And the voters in the area like vehemently voted down this project, and then the people that were trying to build it were like trying to go through the court system to like still push it through, even though the local community didn't want it. So
and that's still ongoing.
That's still ongoing.
Still trying to push that through.
It was just a futuristic spaceport.
It was not a vertport, David.
Yeah, it was not a
vertiport.
You don't get to vote,
a
David.
boutique vertiport.
You're the vocal minority.
Yeah.
For the vertiport, I will, but it's not. They don't have a lot of rope. Anyway.
Yeah, my point being that people seem to be looking at this in maybe a more nuanced way than they once did, and so it does raise some questions as to how this might actually turn out.
No, so that was my thought, was that when taxpayers always say, bring it in, it's worth it, taxpayers need to remember that when it goes bad, everybody else bails, and you're the one on the hook. So,
but what's interesting here is how much of a groundswell would there have been if it wasn't this other gubernatorial candidate sort of bringing this to the forefront? So it's just interesting how those political inroads kind of intersect and what kind of impact it could have.
All right. Mine, in case you missed it this week, actually came out the day we were shooting this live, and it would have been in the top 5 had we put this together sooner. So it's kind of like
you stole it from next week's podcast.
No, I'm just shining a brighter light on a trash mountain.
Let's talk about the trash mountain.
All right, the story that we ran by Ben Munson, the editor of Design and Development Today, is Trash Mountain could burst into flames any minute. I wish we had like an echo effect. At least live.
Do we have that?
No, it's
okay.
like
do that in post.
We'll know that we're a legit podcast when each of us has like 5 to 40 buttons with sound effects that we can play, and just like any minute. Anyway, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Sorry, they did not like the legit podcast. We'll be a more legit podcast when we have more toys.
You're making lots of friends today.
And that's universal.
Open up that popcorn.
About the trash mountain.
Okay. Yeah.
So, public works officials in Everett, Washington have a problem. A 45-foot tall steaming pile of smelly trash problem.
Is it really steaming?
Yes, it is. We'll get to that. The trash mountain is in one of the city's transfer stations and is now 5 feet from reaching the ceiling. Anna, things are so bad at this trash mountain that they have employees just sitting, watching Trash Mountain 24 hours a day because it could burst into flames at any moment. Now, the problem comes from microorganisms eating the refuse and generating heat within this festering junk heap. So it really is.
It's steaming.
Steaming and festering. It all comes down to the worker shortage and a strained supply chain. They don't have enough people to move the trash or anywhere to put it. So the county relies on trains with empty shipping containers to move the garbage from the rail yard to a nearby landfill. Supply chain disruptions have limited the amount of shipping containers that can be transferred over to the rail yard. Now, Trash Mountain could snowball, or maybe trash ball, into a $2 million problem because the county might soon have to start using waste management containers to transport the garbage, which is going to eat into the county's emergency funds. Now, I just think that once your trash mountain gets 20 to 30 feet tall, you start looking for solutions. You know, you're bringing more people in from the street with shovels. I don't know.
Get a hose, start spraying that thing down.
Yeah, I don't know how you get it 5 feet from the ceiling and it's just like, you know what? We better get on this. It's so depending on where you live, unless it's in Everett, I guess to Ben's point in the story was be happy you don't live by a festering trash mountain, but also maybe get ahead of it so that way this doesn't happen and you might burst into flames in the middle of your town. What's that? Just a trash fire? I mean, that's a joke, but...
Is this like Springfield on The Simpsons? They have the tire factory burning, the tire fire that just never goes out?
We actually had, it was T. Marcone, who said, remember the fire at the tire yard in Springfield that has been smoldering for decades? And I stood at my desk and applauded.
Well done.
It's just, we don't get to cover the trash heap beat that much.
Yeah, you don't normally get that beat.
It was when he was talking about the story, I didn't believe it was real.
Well, he kind of undersold. He's like, I don't know. There's this thing going on. I guess it's like a trash mountain that might catch on fire any minute.
Yeah, and we're like,
that's a good one.
Yeah, do that story for sure. Yeah.
Anyway,
I feel like if you live streamed Trash Mountain 24 hours a day, like people would pay like $4.99 a month to just.
Yeah, I mean, you could raise that $2 million. Live streaming not just the trash mountain, but also the worker has to sit and like maybe every once in a while hit a button that says still not on fire.
Yeah, like extra steamy.
They give that guy a mask or something. I mean, good.
This is awful.
And like, what is he gonna do? Just like all of a sudden, Trash Mountain spontaneously combusts. It's not like he's gonna stamp out 45 feet of fire. Just like, I better let someone know. Like, it's you raise a good point, Anna. Just live streaming. All right. Well, let's move on to our final thoughts this week. Anna, before we get out of here, what's your final thought?
I just want to say a thank you to Doug, our loyal.
Faithful listener Doug.
Or faithful listener Doug. I get that wrong every time.
He's loyal.
It's because of Doug that I remembered to actually cancel Netflix, which I asked for your help last week, and Doug he delivered. So anyway, I forgot though that I didn't need to actually binge Netflix last weekend because I still have it for like 3 more weeks. So it was very like I was like, and cancel, and like it was like not very exciting because they're like, okay, we'll stop giving it to you in 3 weeks because you already paid ahead.
Yeah, your last date will be May 24th.
Yeah.
So you have 3 weeks to get on it.
So there was really no drama to that, but it felt good inside. So thanks, Doug.
No, that was that happened to me. I used to have a subscription to UFC Fight Pass, and one day I got so fed up I wanted to cancel it, and I went to cancel it, and then somebody else was using my login, and I was like, "How are you still doing that?" I didn't realize I was buying it on a yearly basis. So like, I was like,
just 8 more months of it, and then you're really gonna stick it to him at that point.
Yeah, never again, Fight Pass. 8 months later, she gone. My final thought this week, just quick and simple, wanted to wish a happy birthday to Chuck Marin, our coworker, the Marinator. He turned a youthful age, I'm sure. He gets older, but that mustache gets younger.
I thought for sure you were going to say the number. Good.
No. I know that he's, celebrating the occasion with it being Cinco de Mayo, so I'm not sure if he's watching this live.
Well, anyway, happy birthday, Chuck.
That's right.
Happy birthday, Chuck.
All right, Jeff. Your final thought this week.
So before I get to trivia, I actually had kind of an interesting convergence of revelations, I guess you could maybe call it.
Oh, here comes some curmudgeon stuff. You had a revelation. What is it?
Hopefully I'm the only person to see this. Hopefully I'm the only unenlightened one, but I thought it was kind of interesting because, as you guys know, for like the last 3 weeks, my daughters have been very heavily involved in the production of their musical at high school. And they're both involved in the crew. And I always appreciated the extracurricular activities and what it exposed them to and what it allowed them to do. But when I was in high school, we didn't, going to a smaller school, we didn't have a ton of options. Yeah. Thankfully, the options we did have were sports. Okay. So I played basketball and football, and all of those things that you want anybody at that age to sort of develop in terms of leadership and problem solving and hard work, I think it's very easy to see that in something like sports.
Yeah.
And maybe not as much in something like crew. I always appreciated it, but until really seeing them get into it as much as they were, not coming home to like 9:30 at night,
Man.
the scope of work that they had to do, the different situations they had to navigate in dealing with people, and developing those team building skills and putting out fires and all that stuff just gave me a great appreciation for that. And it sort of piggybacked, again, my own experience in the military. I was trained in 2 different combat arms, so it's very easy to talk about leadership and again all of these other attributes when you're a platoon leader in an infantry unit as opposed to something else. But I'm reading this amazing book. It's called Secret Soldiers by Philip Gerard, and it talks about this collection of artists and actors and sculptors and painters who were part of this secret operations unit during World War II that were basically out to fool the German army. They would set up different sort of like false musterings of equipment and people. They developed different camouflage techniques.
Wow.
They developed different sonic technology to make it sound like tanks were in one area when really they were someplace else to throw off the German army. And these guys couldn't, it was so top secret, they couldn't talk about this for like 60 years after the war ended.
Cool.
So to hear about all the things that were involved, and there were people that went on to become people in Hollywood, different actors. Douglas Fairbanks, if you know that name, was actually one of the lieutenant commanders of this unit. So just to see all of this, again, what these individuals who have backgrounds that you would not necessarily relate to all of those other attributes that we talk about in terms of leadership, problem solving, dealing with difficult situations, goal setting, all of that, it's there in spades. And where it comes into what we do, when we talk about difficulties hiring people, building teams, look beyond maybe what I always perceived are those traditional backgrounds for having those skills. Somebody who's been involved in stage management could be a really good production manager. Somebody who's been involved in lighting and sound understands quality control. Okay, so it's not just drawing from some of those traditional things you see on a resume, but going a little bit deeper and understanding how some of these different backgrounds can have incredible impacts on your organization and in building these amazing teams. So it's just, again, hopefully I'm the only one who didn't get that. Yeah. But I always appreciated what was there, but the depth of it has just been enhanced by these 2 experiences for me.
I don't think you're the only one that didn't get that. I think there's a lot of underappreciation for the arts and theater in particular in the high school and even younger level. And actually, moving beyond that, like it doesn't end at the high school level. You know, you can do community theater and still foster that same environment, grow the same attributes. Actually, that's one of the things that I look for on resumes is to see if they had anything to do. Obviously, you look for sports for the leadership, but I also would always look for theater. Yeah, it was just you get all these different intangible traits that wind up translating to successful careers.
Yeah, there's always an appreciation for it, but definitely taken to a different level and seeing with my kids and then reading about this Army unit. So.
I think that what we've arrived to is that Jeff should do some community theater.
I think so. Hello, Dolly.
Write a check really well.
Yeah?
When it comes to anything involved with the arts.
Yeah, I think we go to the Bartell and you play Willie Loman. I think it'd be great.
Willie Loman. I thought that when you started out basically with the kids of today lead-in, I thought that you were going to get 100% curmudgeon, but you went the other way. Yeah. So I'm proud of you.
Full of surprises.
Yeah.
You didn't think like Nazi rebel task force lead-in?
Kids today. Today's youth don't understand the value of $1 by Jeff Ranke.
That's all true, but I didn't go there right now.
It's true for all the other ones that don't do anything. Jeff, do we have trivia again this week?
We do. So first of all, just offering the answer to last week, and we had a couple of people we had a lot of people respond. We actually only had 2 people get it right, though. And the question was about if there is somebody suffers from an electrical burn, what should you not touch either the source or the individual with? The answer is your bare hands. You do not want, because obviously you can conduct the electricity. You want to make sure, wrap something around them, whatever. pull them across, make sure they're not in contact with that source of electricity anymore before you try to help them out.
I
so
said
bare hands.
Yeah, I said water, and I stand by it because you probably shouldn't touch them with water either.
There's probably lots of stuff you shouldn't touch them with.
Yeah,
But that's the one, the first one. So Mark, we had two Marks chime in, get that one right. We were up to somebody who's got 3 in a row.
Oh,
Whoa.
So
way to go,
getting
Marks.
into Marina territory here, who still holds the record with 6.
Whoa.
We haven't heard from in a little bit, so hopefully she's still doing great and listening to the podcast. But this week's trivia. Now, this was inspired a little bit by looking at some of those pictures when we were covering that story about those individuals being taken out of that building that collapsed in China. And you saw a lot of first responders doing some pretty heroic stuff there, and it got me thinking about my combat lifesaver training that I had to go through in the Army. We had to know all these different carries that you could use depending on the size of the individual, the scope of their injury, what you had available to you. So I'm going to list off 5 types of carries. One of them is false.
Oh.
Okay.
A false carry.
Which one is not an Army-approved carry? We've got the saddleback carry. We've got the 4-person stretcher carry, the pistol belt carry, the neck drag, the 2-man arms carry.
These are all made up.
Which one is not correct?
Oh. I want it to be neck drag just because that just seems like a brutal carry.
The neck drag.
Yeah.
So again, it depends on your environment and all that, but one of those is definitely false. So let's see what we can get.
Luckily, I married the true carry, not the false carry.
Oh, no.
You can't believe you're hanging on
Hi,
that.
Carrie.
Well done.
All
Well
right.
done.
She might hear that?
She would appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, before we get out of here this week, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. Finally, if you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at in.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You could also subscribe to our daily or weekly newsletters and make sure you get the podcast in your inbox first. All right, for Jeff Ranke and Anna Wells, I'm David Manti. This is the Today in Manufacturing podcast. We'll see you next week.